Before you start up again, yeah, it's so good to see you. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for that.
It sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a minute or two late, so I promise this year that we're going to start right at 5. So last year we were at 5, 7 after, we lost some people that were on the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to go up to the podium now.
Okay.
Thank you for beautiful music. Thank you so much for reminding me your name. Thanks for reminding me. You guys sound great.
Thank you.
It's really nice to meet you.
It's an honor to be here and great to meet you.
Thanks. You also live in Albert. Oh, wow. So that was a good trip. My dad grew up in Brooklyn, so it's nice to have some Portland County representation.
We're going to start in just a few minutes. If folks that are out in the alleyway, grab some food and a drink, and please come in, find a seat. I vowed to start on. We got in trouble last year. Why? Because we were like 8.
Oh, is that right? You lost time?
People on live stream say, I'll keep your stellar performances in mind.
Can I do something for you? If you want to deal with it,
If you end up not staying, you're certainly welcome to. There are containers over in that window. You are? Oh, fantastic. Good. Last call for folks. Please come in and find a seat.
Mr. Johnson, will this be bothered to stay?
No, that's fine right there. Yep, not a problem at all. Good afternoon, everybody. If anybody can't hear in the back, holler, but I think we got the speakers going back there, so things should be fine. I see a thumbs up. Great, thank you. I am Scott Johnson, and I'm chair of the Hogan Award Committee. And I want to welcome everybody to the 10th and final presentation ceremony for the 2024 Hogan Award for Creative, Entrepreneurial, Community Leadership. I'm delighted to see this room filled tonight with such a robust turnout. I think it speaks volumes to the fact that this 10-year journey that we embarked on is coming to its final stage. Not to mention the important contributions of each of the previous 9 awardees, a few of whom are here tonight, and we'll acknowledge them later on in the program. But especially tonight's recognition of Jared Duvall as the 10th and final awardee. Where's Jared? Raise your hand. Right there. Yeah. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you're not familiar with the State House, the bathrooms are down at the end of this hallway. And I'm told that any food that doesn't get eaten or taken away in some of the containers that are over on that window shelf will get thrown out. So before you leave, let's make sure all the food gets eaten or goes home. I want to welcome the Hogan family, represented here tonight by Khan's wife, Jeanette, family good friend Bill, his daughter Ruth and husband Bo, and son Neil and his wife Becky. Thank you all for being here. I also want to thank Ted Mortimer and Glendon Ingalls for providing the music for our ceremony today. Ted is a longtime family friend of Jared's family, so thank you for being here. Also thanks to Brian Palmer, who is not here tonight. He left earlier. He's with the Abbey Group and manager of the Capitol Food Court behind us for all the refreshments and appetizers tonight. So we're here tonight, both in person as well as some people who are watching on a YouTube live stream right now. I want to thank our partners at Orca Media. Vaughn is over here. Zach will be back later on, for handling the technology with us today, as well as having assembled a video compilation of the 9 previous awardees that we'll see shortly. The live stream of tonight's award ceremony will be posted on the Vermont Community Foundation website sometime soon after the event is ended. The Con Hogan Award was our way of recognizing the contributions made by Con to the state of Vermont in public, nonprofit, and private for-profit sectors by encouraging and rewarding leaders who share his vision of a Vermont that places the highest value on the public good and demonstrates his leadership qualities in achieving results. Con's down-to-earth management approach was always backed by data, sophisticated tested theory, and a nuts and bolts practicality. When we established the Hogan Award back in 2015, we planned to make one award in each of 10 years, this being the final award. Over the past decade, we've received nearly 200 nominations, and I'd like to take this moment on behalf of the award committee to thank all of the nominators who have submitted nominations throughout the years. It was inspiring to read them and learn about individuals in our state who are making a huge difference. We are all benefiting from the collective vision, commitment, and efforts of those individuals that we read about, close to 200, not to mention all the other leaders who go unrecognized and weren't part of a nomination process. But all are making our communities and our state a better place to live, raise a family, and thrive. It seems fitting to have the final award ceremony here at the Capitol tonight, where Con spent a lot of time during his tenure in state government. Whether he was speaking with the Committee on Corrections, Health and Welfare, Human Services, Health, or Appropriations, Con was always prepared to speak the truth. Didn't matter whether that was good news or bad news, because the data always spoke for itself. He was a champion of promoting the notion that the intersection of data, community engagement, and getting results is what mattered most. Con's good friend and colleague, Mark Friedman, and author of Trying Hard is Not Good Enough, which is about results-based accountability, RBA in short, liked to quote Con as saying, "Anywhere leads to everywhere." The point being, Con always said, pick an indicator of well-being that needs improvement and get started because it'll take you places you might not have imagined. One example is when Con spoke about teen pregnancy, which can bring with it a herd of other associated indicators like high school completion, substance use, unemployment, poverty, child abuse, etc. You get the point. Con believed, like Mark Friedman did, that trying hard was not good enough. Pick an indicator, get started, build a cross-sector coalition, and turn a not-so-positive trend line toward a favorable outcome. Let me shift gears and say how extremely pleased the Con Hogan Committee is tonight to present this year's award to Jared Duvall Executive Director of Energy Action Network. You'll hear more from Jared directly about his personal journey, his organizational efforts and accomplishments to address climate change and help Vermont meet and exceed every challenge along that journey. Thank you, Jared. So I'd like now to introduce Cheryl Mitchell. She's a founding member of the Hogan Committee, worked as Deputy Secretary to Con at the Agency of Human Services over the 90s, is an expert in early childhood education and systems reform, an educator herself, mentor and colleague to many, including myself, and a good friend of the Hogan family. Cheryl's going to be our MC for the rest of the evening tonight, so Cheryl, please come up and take the podium.
Well, thank you, Scott. And how amazing to see this room full of people who care about the way Con lived in the world and passed on his spirit of leadership to so many of us. I just have to give a shout out to Scott to say that Scott Johnson, the late Paula Duncan, and I used to do something called OST, Open Space Technology. We'd get together with no agenda, nothing particular to do, and trust that something great would come out of it. And one of those times we all said, you know, Con is facing some major challenges. I think we ought to do something in his honor. So that's where this 10-year project came from. In a few minutes, you'll have a chance to meet many of the other people who have been involved in making that possible and the many awardees. But we typically start by sharing just a few personal memories or thoughts about Con, and I'm going to share one or two of mine and then turn it over to Jeanette to share a few of hers. So I initially was going to say, well, these are the reasons that I would have nominated Con Hogan for the Con Hogan Award. One of the criteria was a person who has a track record of making a difference. Well, Con certainly had that. He expanded healthcare coverage for children and families. He assured that the lead levels in babies' bloods were dropping dramatically by all of the programs that got put in place. He created programs that allowed our elders to age in their own homes instead of having to move into nursing homes if that was what they desired. He improved our vaccination rates in the state, keeping us healthy. He created programs that supported young people, especially those with very, very challenging behaviors. He created a welfare reform protocol that many consider the roadmap for family support programs in the United States. And he began shifting from a punitive justice system to a restorative justice system, and so many more things that I won't list. But the second criteria is that somebody should focus on results. Any of you who knew Con knew that he was totally immersed in data. He used it all the time. He wanted to make sure that it was extremely accurate, and he was able to use it to make tremendous difference. And I just want to give a shout out to David Murphy, who's here tonight, who really helped develop the annual indicators of social well-being, the community profiles. Really, Con and Rick Mills, who was then the Commissioner of Education, went around the state. We called it the Con and Rick Show, and they would show communities what was happening in their communities, and people would say, wait a minute, why are the infant mortality rates in my region worse than the rest of the state? Con and Rick would hook them up with somebody who could help them to change things. Or they would say, why are the kids in our community dropping out when the kids over there are going on successfully to college? Again, they use that data to help make significant change. Scott's already mentioned the results-based accountability that Con was an early adopter of, and that is still going on all over the world at this point, but it made a big difference in Vermont. And he helped to create the Vermont Research Partnership with the University of Vermont so that we could focus on what really worked well, looking not just at our own communities, but at the other states in the country and at other countries. The next criteria was people that embraced community connections. And for me, one of the most exciting things that Con was able to do was to hook up policymakers, the commissioners of the different agencies and departments, with the people in local communities who were actually affected by the work that the policymakers did. So he created the regional partnerships, told all of the representatives of his different departments, and usually the people from education and Department of Labor and others came along. And he also created the state team for children and families, which brought together his department commissioners, the folks from labor, the folks from the judiciary, and folks from local communities to talk once a month about what was happening in Vermont. Fourth criteria was somebody who has a generosity of spirit. And I guess in my mind, this is probably the most salient characteristic that I remember of Con. He cared for people individually, no matter whether they were an inmate in one of the correctional facilities, a young mom who was struggling to support her kids, a legislator who was going to make a difference about whatever it was that he wanted to have passed, cared for people individually, but had also the big picture of this is a system that we're part of, and usually when people are struggling, it's not their fault. There's some problem within the system that needs to be addressed. So the final criteria was enthusiasm. And I think any of you that knew Con, and if he was on a jag about something, you could not say, I'll hear about that later. You heard about it right then, and you got on board, and you helped to make a difference. But I think what I would like to do is share 3 short personal stories. And they're just very personal, but it's one of the reasons that I feel grateful to be talking today. The first time I met Con was when he came to visit the Parent-Child Center. We made him take off his shoes. He had to sit on the floor. And he listened to a group of young parents complaining about all of the terrible things that state government was doing and all the stupid policies that we had in place. He listened carefully. He left. I got a call about a week later asking me to come to his office. I put on this dress, which is my good luck dress. I was a little apprehensive because Con had sometimes a reputation of, if he didn't like something that was going on, he would let you know really pretty directly about it. So I walked into his office expecting to get chewed out, and instead he said, "Would you like to join me and be the deputy in this agency?" I was stunned and honored and said, yes. Got to check with my family, but yes. A few years later, I asked him why he'd been willing to take a chance on someone with so little experience in state government. He said, "Peg Martin told me to hire you, and I liked the way that you knew the names of all the moms and babies, and you met each one as they got off the van with a hug and a smile." So I think Con's never been afraid to listen to people saying what they think. He's never been afraid to say what he thinks, and there's a great reciprocal relationship there that has made things great for Vermont. One of the last afternoons that I spent with Con and Jeanette was when they invited me and their granddaughters and Sister Janice Ryan, who was one of Con's major mentors and advisors, and the person who had donated a kidney to Con, to come to their house for an evening. It was a totally magical evening. Ruth put on a dressage exhibit with music that was just breathtaking. Jeanette had prepared this incredible food with many, many local products, and we sat around this table, from grandchildren to people my age to people older, just talking for the evening, looking out at this beautiful Vermont landscape. We talked about life and love and work and how people help one another. And it encapsulated for me the themes that seemed most important to Con. He loved Vermont. He dearly loved his family. He had a wide range of interests, from agriculture to music to human services to social justice. It was a magical evening that I remember. The last time I didn't meet with Con or Jeanette was the day that the Hogan Committee had its traditional lunch with the annual award winner. We had planned to meet with Jim Baker, and we went ahead doing that in Montpelier, but I didn't meet with Con. He and I had planned to meet an hour earlier because we were working on a blueprint for using healthcare funds to really fully fund needed human services for young children and families. Con had, as you all know, passed on the weekend before. So I didn't meet with him that day, but I feel like the work that he started, he and Deb Richter were, I don't know if Deb is here today, but really just had visions of how we might be able to make Vermont the state that really took care of everybody with health care and with the other supports that we needed. So he made a difference for so many people, and I'm grateful that the spirit that he started will be carried on, and we'll hear more about that later. Now, I'd like to ask Jeanette in just a second to come up, but many of you don't know, well, maybe many of you do know, but Jeanette is a powerful force on her own right. She is, or was, married to Con, but she has graciously actually come to this award ceremony every year since he passed on. But she has played music. She's still playing music. She was playing music this afternoon. She and her partner Bill, Tom, who's over here, David Murphy are just, so music is part of their life. The 4-H events that they put on with the horses are amazing, were amazing. The joy that Jeanette expressed the day she joined the Century Club, which means that you and your horse together, your ages, add up to 100. As a physical therapist working with home health, she knew so many families and took care of so many families. She did daily dialysis. I mean, that's an incredible commitment. And she just is an incredible cook and farmer, and the resilience and joy that she expresses are gifts for all of us. So, Jen, I hope you could come up and say a few words.
Give me one of those.
Oh, you can have another one too. Goodness, after that, I'm not at all sure I can remember what I have on this piece of paper. But I do. One of the first things that I want to do, and some of it is reiterating things that Scott had said, is this program, I cannot believe it's been going on for 10 years. It would never have gotten off the ground without the people who decided that this was going to happen. And I send my sincere thanks and congratulations to all the people who have been on the committee, but especially those who are the founders who are still on the committee. It's been an enormous time commitment for them all, and many, many Vermonters have benefited from the time that they have given. So I thank every one of you for having done this. That brings me to the awardees. There have been 10 amazing people that this committee has chosen who have done a lot of the work, a lot of the kinds of work that Con knew and enjoyed doing. And they have covered many of the areas from the arts to education to corrections to the LGBTQ committees areas, and now in environment. So a lot of these areas have been been made better by all the people who have been part of this award ceremony. As far as any real personal kinds of stories, the only one I can think of, and I spoke of this earlier to someone who's here, that when this plan, I'll call it a plan, got started probably 11 years ago, when the committee got together, decided what they were going to do and call it the Hogan Award. They knew that they were not going to be able to tell Con about it because he would say, oh, no, you can't do that. That's not. But Cheryl called me on the phone and said, we're going to do this. We've already made a date for when you're going to have it. It's going to be, excuse me, over at VCFA. A lot of plans had already been made, but you're not allowed to tell Con. Not until things are so far along that he can't say no. So I kept it a secret. And I don't know, 6 weeks later maybe, I don't know how long later, they finally told Con. And he then found out that I knew, and you know what? He was really pissed at me. He couldn't believe that I had kept a secret from him. You know, you've been married that long, you're not allowed to keep secrets. But that's probably the only personal one I want to do tonight, because I could go on. Each one of the awardees has had so much work done and have followed so many of the things. One of the things that Con really enjoyed doing was giving accolades to any of the people who had worked in any kind of a committee that had success. He wanted to share the thank yous and the awards, even if there had been a tiny little piece of a participation. He spread the thanks to everywhere. And I think I hear that from a lot of people here. The only other thing I was going to say is that Cheryl took part of what I was going to say, but I'll say it again anyway. You all know, you've all talked about the data. And David Murphy is one of the ones that I was going to talk about. And if anybody has any questions about how you deal with data, how you collect it, he's right over there. Con would be so proud of all the people, all the awardees who have come through this program, and he would be unbelievably humbled to know that all of this work that has been going on has been for the betterment, I'll say, of all the people here in Vermont. And he would be very humbled by this whole plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeanette. We're actually going to have a chance to see a video of all the awardees over the past 10 years that was basically put together by the amazing people at ORCA, but it really was Diana Wally, who was one of the original committee members. She's been here for 10 years. Con actually sent her to Ireland to represent Vermont because she was so into data and community partnerships. I think we're going to press the button, and then we're going to ask those of you who are the awardees, I'll just call your names and ask you to stand and get recognized.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
We need to shift the definition of wealth from a level of accumulated money to a feeling of well-being, a feeling that you have enough. What would that take? What would the metrics be to gauge kindness, care, and enoughness in our society? So just think about it. If a person has a sense of well-being and enoughness and lives in a culture that reinforces that, then that person
Let me just back it up
will
a minute.
want the same feeling of enoughness for others. We need to shift the definition of wealth from a level of accumulated money to a feeling of well-being, a feeling that you have enough. What would that take? What would the metrics be to gauge kindness, care, and enoughness in our society? So just think about it. If a person has a sense of well-being and enoughness and lives in a culture that reinforces that, then that person will want the same feeling of enoughness for others. It just works that way. So how might that affect our societal structures, our human services system, our economic system, and how we treat and interact with the planet and all beings that are on our home planet?
I think the kind of, as far as I could tell, is Con Hogan is somebody who has always simply said, what is the problem? How do we break the problem down into its smaller parts? How do we understand sort of the details of the issue or the problem that's in front of you? And to then not get the sort of the typical things in your way, not to think so hard that this is the way things are, therefore then we can't dream about the way they should be. So Con has certainly done that. Predecessor in this award did that. I have done that in my work, and I think that's the person you want to have. I think you want to have someone in this. It's leadership, but it's also leadership with an attempt to bring new ideas to light, and to bring them in a way that is sort of both fact-based, but also is community-based.
A whole new field around youth work and after school and expanded learning opportunities. And I mean, I have to take a moment really to just talk about that time outside the school day and how critical it is to the healthy development and academic achievement and long-term success of our children and youth. And the fact that when we look at where kids fall behind, it's not really while they're sitting in the classroom. It's outside the classroom, over the summer when they have different access to different types of opportunities and adult role mentors and peers and exposure to exciting programming or hands-on learning experiences or work-based learning experiences. And I think the field that, not me alone, I think all of us together are trying to grow is how do you do that really well? How do you sit in the space between education and youth development and feed all those different aspects of what it takes to grow a young person into a strong, healthy, fully fledged adult.
Yeah, just as a reminder, when I accepted the award, I talked about a focus of mine was wellness of first responders. And, shortly after accepting the award, it took me some time to think it through how this would look. And during the summer and fall of 2019, we pulled together a working group of first responders throughout the state, really tested this theory that I had that not all first responder communities get access to mental health support as a result of exposure to trauma and stress. And it validated that my thoughts were spot on. And one of the first goals was to hold the first ever First Responder Wellness Conference, which we held on December 9th of 2019. And I had no idea at that time that my phone would ring 3 weeks later, asking me if I would be the interim commissioner of corrections.
The Agency of Human Services asked if I would start a low barrier shelter in Burlington, and I said no. They asked again, and I said no. And all the while, I was thinking, this isn't our business. The third time they asked, I said yes, because it was the right thing to do, and because CVO's mission is to bridge gaps and build futures. I can still remember the very next day, I said to myself, what have you done? It was a good decision. It was the right decision. And we learned much, and we did much to help build futures. And we keep building futures. I feel that I met Con along the way. Thank you.
Finally, as a respected and visionary leader in public health himself, Con, near the end of his life, long before COVID-19, was able to express to me personally his admiration for our strategic planning, tireless efforts, and data-driven approach, and the incredible things we were able to do to improve Vermonters' health and lives and future trajectories. As Jeanette alluded to, he would be thrilled and excited and proud of every one of you, whether you be at the central office or in one of the districts. This award in his honor is a tribute to each of you, and I am so delighted that we can all share it together. And again, thank everyone for bestowing this award upon the Vermont Department of Health. Thank you.
By putting art at the center, and by protecting, cherishing, and celebrating land that's held by Black Vermonters and other people of color who have been historically marginalized in land ownership and land stewardship. This is important. It's important not only for Black Vermonters, Indigenous people, other people of color. This is important for all Vermonters. It's a matter of equity, yes. And it's also a powerfully enriching and important opportunity for every single Vermonter to benefit from the diversity of land ownership and stewardship in the state, and a greater diversity. When white people visit this farm, children and adults alike are experiencing something extremely unique. The experience of being welcomed into Black space, and the experience of the joy of discovering a world and a people of diverse cultures and perspectives right here in Vermont.
So it is symbolically important we listen. We must listen to understand. We must realize that immigrants look at things through different lenses. That's not a flaw or something to be ignored, but an opportunity for better understanding. Too many of us have not paid attention to the numerous impediments facing immigrants. And it starts when we open to dialogue either as a group or individuals. The important thing that is that we start talking, and more importantly, we start listening. But we also must literally listen.
And we are a multiracial, grassroots, mostly working class organization focused on movement building and capacity building for rural LGBTQ people. So we really focus on building up the community and connection, visibility for our community, and making sure that our folks have access to the power and kinds of resources that they need to live happy and connected and fulfilled lives. So that's the work of our organization. We do that in many, many different ways. It's something that I've really loved about being out in the open. Our community and my board members and our coworkers have really trusted me to follow, my interests and passions, and now the interests and passions of the staff members that we have as well, and knowing what it is that we need, and then manifesting that in work that supports the community to hopefully get their own needs met as well. So some of that is through creative projects in oral history and looking at how are we using cultural practices and arts-based practices to gain access to power and do community organizing. Some of that is traditional peer support programs, so identity-based things where people are offering peer support to each other and connecting around that.
Pretty amazing. So I'm going to call your attention to your program brochure. Across the top of the front page are all of the people that have won this award over the past 10 years. Dr. Lydia Clemens was not able to be with us tonight. She had a prior engagement, and Jan is actually here, but you can't see her because she's inside one of those cameras. But as I call your name, if you'd be good enough to stand up, that would be great. So Ellen Kaler. Michael Monty. We think he may not be here. Holly Morehouse. James Baker. Shout out to you inside the camera, Jan. I don't know that there's anybody here from the Department of Health. I don't know if Dr. Levine is here. I don't think he is. Joe Weah. And H.B. Lozito. Many of our awardees in past years also got pushed into action as the new committee members as time went forward. And you will find again, inside your brochure, pictures of all of the people that have been members of this committee and their names over the years. My husband says that does not look anything like you. Some of us might have been younger when our pictures were taken. But for those of you who have been on the committee, could you stand, please? Wow, thank you. There were two members who we didn't mention being here from day one and sticking to the end, and one is Paul Silo, so I just want to give a shout out to Paul. Thank you. Another tradition of this award is that the person who was the recipient last year says a few words of encouragement to this year's awardee. So I had the great fun of interviewing HB over at the Orca Studios last year, trying to get you all to submit nominations. And I would like to ask HB to come up and just give a few words of encouragement to Jared and the rest of us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I like her lucky dress. Thank you. Hi, everybody. That was a different prompt than what Scott gave me, so hopefully this is encouraging. I think it will be. Scott and Eitan's prompt was, tell us what this award has meant for you and share with us some of what your last year has been. So I'm going to do some of that, and we'll see how it goes. Lots of eclipse talk coming up. Little preview. So thank you so much. It's really such a treat and an honor to get to be back with all of you. Today, and congratulations, Jared. I'm really looking forward to hearing your reflections shortly, and to continuing to be part of this really special group of honorees for many years to come. It's really astounding to be back here with all of you having this conversation just 1 year later. This has been, for many of us, a tough and beautiful and transformative year. It has been for me and for my organization Out in the Open. You heard me talk about that a little bit. I'm glad I'm not wearing the same shirt today as I was. And we work to build the power and community of rural LGBTQ people throughout northern New England. We've been based here in Vermont for the last 12 years, and we do that work in Maine, near where I grew up as well. So I've really found the impacts of receiving this award have been both personal as well as public. I am, for instance, the focus of a magazine cover story this month, which I've never been before. Yes, thank you. And during the interview process, I learned that the writer had wanted to do a piece about me and about Out in the Open for many years, but it was the recognition of the Con Hogan Award that finally convinced her editors that my story was cover material, which was very interesting to find out. Personally, I felt an increase in my own confidence to pursue things that had previously felt out of reach, like cold calling Will at the Vermont Community Loan Fund in the spring when I was trying to quickly put together the final pieces of financing to purchase some land for my organization for Out in the Open. Thank you, Will, for talking. I told you would make a brief appearance. We didn't end up utilizing the support, but the conversations that I had with folks at VCLF were really helpful and really supportive in those final and frenzied weeks. We had been dreaming someday of being able to buy land to serve as a permanent physical home for our rural LGBTQ community, but I couldn't ever really truly let myself believe it would actually be real until we signed the papers to close on the property in early March of this year. The land purchase was, yes, very exciting. The land purchase was something that we've been working towards essentially every single day in some way for the past 10 years.
Our new home is at the perfect stage of development with important infrastructure like a drilled well and a gravel driveway, but not yet any existing buildings, so that we can come in and do all of what I think of as the really fun stuff. Building out a campus that works for our community and our needs while still being at a scale and a price that we could afford. We're planning to create refuge and retreat space with overnight accommodations and daytime gathering and organizing space, room to create art, a rural LGBTQ social movement, library and archive, all while having the land open and accessible to feed our community members' minds, hearts, and bodies. Vermont, as many of you know, has long been at the forefront of LGBTQ work in the United States, and we at Out in the Open intend to honor that legacy by continuing to work towards making Southern Vermont a national home for rural LGBTQ organizing and community building. 1 month after we closed on this magical 3.1 acres in West Brattleboro, I drove north to take in the eclipse with some dear friends at their farm at the Intervale in Burlington. Did anyone here experience or see totality during the eclipse? Yes. I was absolutely transfixed and transformed. And I'm very happy to go on at length about the beauty of the corona, about totality itself. And if anyone wants to do that, please come find me after. And I want to talk about the connections of the eclipse to our work at Out in the Open. Pluralism is something that we've been exploring a lot this past year. We're part of a community of practice with other organizations around the U.S. expanding this work, supported by funding from the New Pluralists and their Healing Starts Here program. That work is rooted in principles including widening the circle of belonging, taking responsibility for repair, honoring human dignity, acknowledging difference, and upholding the collective by being in relationship and in practice with each other. Narratives that were told nationally and in popular media about rural communities are that we are deeply divided and separated from each other, and that rural places cannot possibly be positive places for rural queer and trans people to live. But that's never been my experience in the rural communities that I call home. I find more often, as many people have talked about this evening already, that we are actually deeply interdependent in small places because we all need all of us to get through. Pluralism helps make room for everyone while holding each other in loving accountability. We all get to belong here together, and we all get to figure out how to be here together. I found the eclipse to be perhaps the single most pluralistic experience I've ever had. And after totality was over, my friends and I went to the bike path along Lake Champlain. We knew that every single person who we passed along the way had all just witnessed this incredible and awe-inspiring event. Everyone can sense in some way and experience totality if they're in the area. We had an instant point of connection among every person around us. Totality created a shared experience from which to gain greater understanding of each other, of ourselves, and of the world around us. It was so fleeting and yet so powerful. It is exactly what we try our very best to create at Out in the Open for our community members every time that we gather. We work hard to fill each other up with connection, to inspire a deep sense of wonder and curiosity, to make shared experiences from which we can all move towards action together. Because, as one of our brilliant community members shared years ago after one of our summits, rural LGBTQ spaces are important to me because loneliness gets in the way of fighting injustice. Later in the spring, just about a month after the eclipse, 2 of us Out in the Open staff members, along with 32 other groups who are part of the Healing Starts Here program, met up for a convening in New Mexico. Really exciting groups like the Plessy and Ferguson Initiative, which was started by descendants of the infamous Separate but Equal Supreme Court case, who are also married partners, Keith Plessy and Phoebe Ferguson, which feels mind-blowing to me. Their organization helps people deepen their understanding of history so we can move forward into a more just and equitable future together. We talked about the necessity of working in close collaboration with funders who share our desire for a transformed world, from one that works for only few of us to one that works for all of us. We talked about the power of emergence, focusing on relationships and trust building as long-term and steady strategies for driving that positive change within a dynamic and a constantly shifting world. We talked about the importance of big ideas and working together towards them. Unfortunately, the excitement and momentum that we gained from that convening was stopped in its tracks as so many other things in July. Just 3 months after I was laying in the middle of their farm field, taking in the awe-inspiring eclipse, my friend's farm, along with all the other farms at the Intervale, was once again under feet of water for the second summer in a row. When Scott was like, talk about your year, I was like, well, okay, here we go. So last year, thanks in part to the Vermont Community Foundation, Out in the Open raised and distributed tens of thousands of dollars in direct financial mutual aid to rural LGBTQ people who were impacted by the floods. This year, we watched as the home of one of our own beloved staff members was washed down the river in Plainfield. We used our organizational platform to support people in raising money to get back on their feet afterwards. Though, of course, we know that long-term recovery will take many years. I did just see him this afternoon, though, and he has a new puppy. We met up on the State House lawn, which was very sweet. This past weekend, that same coworker rejoined our staff after a break to focus on home and family to help put on our 10th annual Out in the Open Summit for rural LGBTQ folks. 10th in general, and the first one at our very own land, which was really exciting. After the event was over, I eagerly read through some of our feedback on Sunday evening, and upon first glance, one comment especially stood out to me. A participant said, "It felt so comfortable and informal, while clearly also being so well thought out and intentional." This is part of what I've been trying to help people understand about Out in the Open for many years, and this person really seemed to get it. I often describe part of our work as being the theater techs. If we're doing our job correctly, participants won't even really notice the lighting, but they'll be transfixed by the powerful experience they've somehow just had. They'll leave wanting more, and they'll feel more deeply connected to those they shared the experience with. I feel so lucky to continue getting to do this work alongside so many of you in this room and so many people who can't be here this evening. This is just a small snippet of what some of the past year has been like for me, really honestly made possible by this committee's belief in me and my desire to continue transforming my world. So congratulations, Jared. Hopefully that gave you something. And thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much, HB. So now we're here at the moment that you've all been waiting for, which is when we have the chance to confer the last ever award, but hopefully the work is going to go forward forever on this year's recipient. And I have to say, I was not on the committee to make the choice this year. When I showed up at the committee room to just see, how much longer it was going to be dragging out, they all said, "Oh, it's all done." We all came to agreement pretty much immediately. The same thing had happened the very first year of the award, when the award went to Ellen Kaler. And in the intervening years, there was a grid to rate and talk about, and took a long, long time to come up with recipients. This year, Jared, I think there was something magical going on. I had never even heard, I'm embarrassed to say, of Jared Duval at that moment. Then I got to read his nomination, and suddenly it was like when you get a blue raincoat and you suddenly notice like everybody's got a blue raincoat, or you're pregnant and suddenly everybody is pregnant. Jared Duval's name kept popping up in any setting that I was in. So I am actually going to read, again, take a look at your brochure. You can read along with me or not. But in the interest of keeping this on the Orca video for future years, I'm going to read aloud what it says, and then I'm going to give you two personal thoughts about it. So, and you can listen or read along as you want. Jared Duval, a 9th century Vermonter who grew up in the upper Connecticut River Valley, developed an early interest in climate issues and took action in high school, college, and his work life. He's now the executive director of the Montpelier-based Energy Action Network. His parents did not have college degrees and had little income after his middle-aged father suffered multiple heart attacks and became disabled. When Duval was young, his mother worked for Chelsea Green Publishing in White River Junction and often brought home books on the environment, piquing his interest in energy and climate issues. In high school, he was moved to action, working on recycling, hosting candidates for public office, and organizing for the Sierra Club's Sierra Student Coalition, the country's largest student-run environmental organization. Duval majored in economics and political science at Wheaton College in Massachusetts. graduating summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa in 2005. He then spent 3 years in Washington, D.C. as the national director of the Sierra Student Coalition, helping to design and lead campaigns such as the Campus Climate Challenge, which saw over 500 U.S. campuses commit to climate neutrality and take steps to become models of sustainability. After earning the Master of Public Affairs degree from Princeton, Duvall returned to Vermont in 2014 and served as Economic Development Director at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, responsible for supporting working lands and green economy businesses across the state. In 2017, he was hired as EAN's Executive Director. He was appointed to the Vermont Climate Council in 2020, co-authored the state's Climate Action Plan, and serves on the Public Assets Institute board. Duvall is the author of The Next Generation Democracy, What the Open Source Revolution Means for Power, Politics, and Change. He lives in Montpelier with his wife, Joan, and son, Liam, who are here. And you'll meet them later. So, in the sort of blue raincoat situation, I was at an event with Howard Dean 2 weeks ago. He was talking about practicing democracy. So Jared's name comes up as an exceptional young leader in Vermont. I got an email from a guy named Tim Ash, who's apparently some hot legislator. He said, I don't know you, but I heard that you were going to be introducing Jared, and I'm glad to know that he's getting the Con Hogan Award. I don't know Jared beyond encountering him in his professional work, and in that sense, I can put him in contrast to hundreds of other people who work the halls of the State House. As I told him when I appointed him to the Climate Council, I think of him not only as someone of the highest integrity and a sharp mind, but he's also the climate warrior I've encountered in Vermont who better than anyone else communicates complicated stuff clearly at all times and doesn't drown people in nerd speak and slogans. I may not have a perfect BS meter, but I have a decent one, and Jared never once set it off. Sincerely, Tim Ash. And this is from one of the people who wrote a recommendation that went along with the nomination. And she's actually here today, so you'll know who she is in a minute. A naturally gifted leader, Jared is humble and regularly seeks out guidance and input from trusted advisors and mentors. He is deeply trusted by legislators as a neutral subject matter expert. He is regularly called upon to testify on a wide range of energy and climate bills each session. His years of effective service and expertise in the energy climate sectors is why he was appointed to the Vermont Climate Council and selected as its co-chair. Jared went beyond the call of duty to ensure that the council published an aspirational, visionary, and actionable climate action plan for the state, which you can pick up out here on your way out. Jared became the executive director of EAN at a time when the renewable energy industry was unnecessarily competitive with each other. There was distrust among industry stakeholders and big egos that often got in the way of mutually beneficial collaboration. I've come to judge the health of a network of organizations by how much members respect and praise each other. I think this is what Jeanette was telling us about Con's way of doing business. How much they collaborate on mutually beneficial projects together as opposed to going it alone, and how much appropriate hugging is taking place in a room when they are gathered together. This might sound unimportant, but when Jared first became executive director, there was not much hugging going on at the start of the annual summit or other types of meetings. If you were to attend an EAN summit now, you would be walking into a high-volume, hugging, animated, and big smile group of people who are happy to be in the same room together, ready to get to learn and take action together. Jared's warmth, kindness, dedication, commitment, and hard work, as well as the services EAN is providing to the energy climate sector, is the big reason for the change in culture and connectiveness that is now widely apparent throughout the network. Sincerely, Ellen Kaler. So it's our total pleasure, Jared, to invite you up here we saw a lot of actual hugging and smiles going on as people were walking into this room. And as Jeanette said, Con would be proud and thrilled. I can't remember who it was, probably Diana, who said if Con and Jared were in the same room together, they would be going berserkly happy on data and policy and dreams. So, congratulations.
It's an appropriate convo. My goodness, thank you everybody so much. It's really beautiful to look out and see so many friends and colleagues. First, I just want to say, I know you've been sitting for a little bit, so if anybody wants to stand up, stretch your legs, get something to eat or drink while I'm sharing remarks, please do not hesitate. I will not take offense at all. Thank you so much, Cheryl and Scott, for your introduction, for your service to Vermont, and for the integral role that you and others played in establishing this award to honor Con and his service and public service across Vermont. It's incredibly humbling to be standing here, given Con's, the committees, and prior award recipients. HB, thank you for those wonderful words, all of your public service contributions. It is an honor to be associated with Con's legacy and to be counted among such a dedicated group of prior recipients who've made such contributions to our state. So first, I want to just thank Con Hogan, the Hogan family, and the selection committee for this recognition. While I unfortunately never met Con, I am grateful to feel as though I knew him through the stories that have been shared by Jeanette and by Ruth and other family members, colleagues, and friends, and through his own voice by reading the incredible short stories that he shared through his Met Along the Way books of short stories. And Jeanette really kindly brought a number of extra copies, which are out here. And for anybody who has not read these or is looking for a thoughtful gift that might bring some joy and inspiration to someone else, I strongly encourage you to pick up one or more copies before you leave tonight. And if they run out, I understand that Jeanette may have some more. Even though these books were published years ago, the stories and the lessons in them are really timeless. Con's example of public service includes his dedication and longevity serving 4 Vermont governors, his focus on centering good data and community voices in the policymaking process, and his commitment to civil discourse, all while keeping a sense of humor. Even as times change, Con's example resonates and is still so relevant today. And continues to be represented by the best of our public servants in Vermont, many of whom are here this evening. And it's wonderful to look out and see so many amazing folks. I'd like to share a little bit of my story to help express how meaningful receiving this award is. And I can't tell my story without telling the story of my parents. I was not expecting that. The people who have shaped me the most are my mom, Alice Blackmer, who is here, and it doesn't help that she is crying a little bit too. And my dad, Bill Duval, who died nearly a decade ago now. My parents both instilled in me a deep love of Vermont, including of our history, of our people, and a rooted connection to the land and an ethic of environmental responsibility, and an awareness of the economic challenges faced by those with lower incomes and a strong commitment to the working class of Vermont. My mom's family has deep roots in Vermont, mostly in central Vermont, from Barnard to Stockbridge to Bethel to South Royalton to Warren and Barry and Montpelier. Matrilineally, my mom is part of the 8th, and I, along with my sister Juliet, who is here this evening, are lucky to be part of the 9th generation of our family in Vermont. And while I strongly believe that anyone can feel a deep love of Vermont and that we are all equally Vermonters, no matter how long we or our families have been here, I do feel a special connection to and commitment to this state through the lives of my ancestors. From the hill farmers who cultivated land and built a life in towns like Chateauguay that no longer exist, but whose stone walls and cellar holes you can still visit, to the granite workers in Montpelier and Barry, whose legacy is all around us. It is especially meaningful to me that this ceremony is being held in the Vermont State House. It has been passed down through our family that my 4th great-grandfather, James McLaughlin, who immigrated to Montpelier from Antrim, Ireland, to work in the granite sheds in the early 1800s, that he worked some of the stone that makes up this building. I want to repeat something I said to my mom last year when I turned 40. I told her, perhaps the greatest gift you have given me is to make me know and believe and never doubt that old, timeless values around honesty, virtue, hard work, kindness, sacrifice, and dedication are not quaint or naive, but are to be taken very seriously and are core to what it means to live a good life and be fully human. I feel like one of the greatest sadnesses of our time is a creeping nihilism and hedonism, the combined ideas that on the one hand, nothing really matters, and on the other, that life is about narrow selfishness, ironic detachment, hollow spectacle, and instant gratification. But I know that certain values are truly timeless, and certain ways of living are deeply important, that there is and will always be truth and goodness in these old, timeless values, and that it is worthwhile to strive to live by them, even especially in the face of dismissiveness or disappointment. And I know all of this because of you. You instilled and supported those attributes and never made me feel silly, embarrassed, or naive for believing in and striving to follow them. I can't imagine a greater gift from a parent to a child. So thank you, Mom. My dad also instilled in me a respect for and love of nature, taking me fishing and hunting with him starting when I was 4 years old. My dad was the hardest working person I've ever known, first as a chef and then as a handyman. He shaped me in so many ways, and I carry his memory with me every day. When I was 10 years old and Juliet was 9, about 5 years after our parents had divorced, my dad had a massive heart attack that nearly killed him. But thanks to paramedics who didn't give up, and after a quadruple bypass surgery, he survived. But afterwards, his heart pumped at about a fraction of what a healthy heart would. And though I wouldn't learn this until many years later, given the damage to his heart, my dad had been told by his doctors that he probably could expect to live less than another 10 years. This is what my dad heard at the age of 45, with 2 children who were age 10 and 9 at the time. The surgery and his weakened health left him unable to continue his job as a chef. Without income during his recovery, he lost his apartment, his van was repossessed, his medical-related debt later forced him to file for bankruptcy. Without a place to live, unable to physically continue as a chef, he ended up setting up at a flea market, buying and selling things during the days, and camping in a tent behind his table at nights. Eventually, he recovered enough that he was able to work again as a handyman and independent contractor and find an apartment of his own. What my dad's experience taught me is that even the strongest, hardest working people can get knocked off their feet sometimes. And that it's at those moments when we see what our society is made of and how our government works and who it works for. We're seeing one of those moments right now for hundreds of Vermonters. So I want to pause because I see a number of people in this room who are working on this, and my gratitude is with you. I want to pause to thank those who are shining a light on Vermont's mess on sheltering and who are working to find solutions rather than allow our neighbors without shelter to be ignored or forgotten. So thank you. It was around the time after my dad's heart attack and all that he experienced afterwards that I was learning in school about the ideas and ideals of democracy, especially in ancient Greece, and that I began following politics, especially because of my dad's experience and because my family struggled economically. I was drawn to the ideal, not always realized, but always inspiring and ever possible, that the public could be represented by anyone, and that even somebody like me could be able to work to represent the values and examples of hardworking, salt-of-the-earth people like my parents, who faced real challenges and deserved a government that was on their side and that could make things better for regular folks. I was empowered and motivated by the idea that public servants could make a difference in the lives of those with less power and wealth, and that it didn't matter what your last name is, where you were born, or how much money you have or property you own. Some of this was on my mind the very first time that I toured this building 3 decades ago, when I was about the age that my son is now. I remember I was with my aunt, Ellen McKay Jewett, who is here, and she at the time worked for the Vermont Historical Society, and she lived in Montpelier when I was growing up. And it was during that tour of this State House that I remember my life's dream starting to take shape, of being a public servant on behalf of the state and the people that I love. Specifically at that time, it was to serve as an elected member of the legislature in this building. The idea of crafting policy guided by the examples and experiences of people like my parents. Now, that specific dream has not happened, despite trying once. But in that, I feel like I'm in good company, because Con also ran a campaign that came up short. But driven by that dream of being able to represent the values that my parents instilled in me, and of being able to respond to the challenges of Vermonters in tough economic situations, and on behalf of environmental responsibility, which has been the through line of my life's work, I worked hard in school and started getting engaged in community organizing efforts. In high school, my first engagement in public affairs was organizing to oppose a large commercial construction project that was proposed in the Great Hollow Wetlands, a sensitive ecological area near my school in Lebanon, New Hampshire. We won that effort over a number of years through dedication and hard work before local zoning and planning boards. But I will never forget what it felt like to be dismissed by some officials and powerful individuals who told me that I was just a student, and that as a 16-year-old, I just didn't understand economics or political realities. I remember never wanting to be in a situation again where my lack of expertise or qualifications would allow me to be marginalized or to be less effective than I could be on behalf of an important public issue. So with my parents' encouragement, even though neither of them were college graduates themselves, after high school I went to Wheaton College, where I double majored in economics and political science. By earning need and merit-based scholarships, I'd later go on to study research methods, economics, and public policy in graduate school. In the process of all of this preparation and learning, I was changing as well. I moved from being more of an activist holding certainty to more of an analyst holding curiosity. From somebody who was focused on what I knew to somebody who was more interested in what I didn't know, or even what I thought I knew that might be wrong. Somebody who became less satisfied with complaint and critique and more interested in practical problem solving, including listening to dissenting views and wrestling with imperfect options. I came to strongly believe, as I understand Con did, that the purpose of data and analysis is not to support a preformed position or a prior commitment. It is to get closer to the truth with evidence and as objectively as possible by testing assumptions, asking hard questions, keeping an open mind, and tracking the metrics that matter. In other words, I learned that good intentions are not enough, and that good data should inform policy positions rather than the reverse, rather than having preformed policy positions determine what data you seek or listen to. And while complexity and nuance are much more difficult to communicate, complexity and nuance is often what is true and necessary. As the great quote widely attributed to H.L. Mencken goes, "For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong." So in the summer between the 2 years of my Master of Public Affairs program, I decided to seek an internship back home in Vermont. I wanted it to be focused on learning more about and contributing to economic and community development back home. I asked around, including some folks at the Vermont Community Foundation, about who was doing great innovative work, who I could talk to. In other words, the people who were not satisfied with the simple but wrong approach. And the same names kept coming up: Ellen Kaler, Paul Silo, Paul Costello, Gay Symington, and Noel McKay. When I reached out to each of them as an unknown graduate student, every one of those leaders got back to me and made time to speak with me. And it was thanks to Noel McKay, who was Commissioner of Housing and Community Development at the time and who's here this evening, thank you, that I started working at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, first as an intern, and then after graduate school, joining the staff. I am grateful and humbled to say that every one of those amazing leaders who I reached out to generously became mentors to me. And they are exactly the type of public servants that Con admired and that we can and should strive to be like. I know that I personally do, and that there are a whole new generation of public-minded Vermont leaders who do also. Thank you. I see almost all of those folks are here tonight, and that means a lot. So with examples to follow from public servants like them and others, and with my college and graduate training, I became prepared to serve a data-driven nonprofit committed to rigorous analysis, collaboration, and public accountability, a place like Energy Action Network, where we work to make complex energy and climate issues understandable and accessible to Vermonters as accurately and honestly as possible. And we work respectfully with a diverse array of stakeholders who bring different perspectives and expertise. And even though that's not the original vision I may have had of public service for Vermont back when I first came into this state house, that's okay, because I strongly believe that it's not the specific title or position we hold that matters when it comes to public service. It's the positive impact that we make from whatever position we hold. And I think that we all have far more ability than we might think to contribute to the public good, even if we aren't in positions typically associated with political leadership. And I think that this is something that's been clear to me from conversations with Jeanette and Ruth and others who knew and loved Con, that he would have agreed with this, that it's not the position or the title that you hold that matters, but the positive difference that you make. Another reason that it is so meaningful to be the 10th and final recipient of this award is because of who the first recipient was, and that's Ellen Kaler, a mentor who I've looked up to, relied on, and learned from for many years. I do not think it is a coincidence that the first and last recipients of this award lead organizations that support collective impact networks. I suspect that Ellen shares a feeling that I have, that as much as this award was given to us as individuals, it's really a reflection of the way that we do our work, with systems thinking, collaboration, and data analysis. And that the work is so much bigger than us, and that without the large networks that we both serve and learn from. Both Ellen and I are fortunate to have been entrusted with the leadership of organizations that utilize a collaborative model in support of very broad networks. And it's the collective impact model and the systems-based collaborative approach that really deserves attention more than us as individuals. I see this year's award as being a recognition and importance of the impact of Energy Action Network. And I want to acknowledge all of those who make EAN the amazing organization and network that it is, from our staff to our board, to our network members, to our public sector partners and our funders. So specifically, I want to thank Kara Robacek, who is here, who is our amazing network manager and deputy director. For the last 4 years, Kara has been the glue of our network, organizing our network summits and supporting our many network action teams. And thank you also to those who have helped serve and build EAN's network in prior years in the same role that Kara has now, including Carolyn Wesley, who is right there, and Linda McGinnis. I also want to thank Lena Steer, our incredible data manager and research analyst, who, among other roles, managed the production of EAN's just released 2024 Annual Progress Report for Vermont on Emissions, Energy, Equity, and the Economy, copies of which are right here behind Scott and Cheryl. Please take them. If they run out, there's more underneath. Give them to friends, anybody you think might be interested. I want to thank Linda McGinnis, EAN's board chair, who very generously nominated me for this award, and to our whole board and just every network member of EAN. I also really want to thank Arthur Berndt, who is here and whose vision and generosity, alongside Ann Berndt and Jennifer Berman, was foundational, was instrumental to EAN's founding, and whose ongoing commitment is foundational to all that we do. Thanks to the Vermont Community Foundation as well, for all sorts of reasons. As an institution supporting the Con Hogan Award over the last decade, for organizing tonight's event. Thank you, Zoe, for all you did behind the scenes, and others. But also for the support of EAN through its core partner grant and through donor-advised funds, especially the incredible support and instrumental support of the Sunflower Fund. Part of the reason that this award is so meaningful is that while I feel and I know that those in the energy and climate community know about and value EAN's work, it takes it to a whole nother level. And I see HB nodding about this. It takes it to a whole nother level to have your work recognized and appreciated by leaders representing other important fields in Vermont, from health to education and more. So thank you to the selection committee and the Vermont Community Foundation for communicating with this selection that EAN's work to help move Vermont beyond fossil fuels to a cleaner, less costly, more equitable energy future is important for our whole state, and is seen as being important by a broad cross-section of devoted public servants and Vermont leaders, not just for those of us who work on energy and climate issues every day. I have believed this before I joined EAN, and I'll believe it after whatever point I'm not with EAN. EAN is not just any organization. It is one of Vermont's indispensable organizations, like the Public Assets Institute, like the Vermont Council on Rural Development, like the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and many more. I feel so fortunate to have been entrusted with stewarding EAN. And because I feel that our work is indispensable to Vermont, I want to share information with you about EAN's funding situation. Those who follow the world of foundations and philanthropy may not be surprised by this, but over the past few years, 3 foundations or funds that were long-term funders of EAN's work just closed. The John Merck Fund, the High Meadows Fund, and the Sustainable Future Fund. A 4th, the Garfield Foundation, ended its Collaborative Networks funding program. Collectively, this led to the loss of $150,000 to $200,000 in annual funding to support EAN's core work on behalf of Vermont and our energy future. That is far too big of a hit to absorb without finding new champions who believe in and will invest in our collaborative work together going forward. Whether one cares about high-quality research and analysis to ground and inform Vermont's energy and climate progress, evidence-based policy conversations, the importance of an independent organization to ensure truth-telling and accountability, supporting multi-stakeholder collaboration, innovative development of new programs and policy, a more equitable energy future, or any aspect of the work that we do at EAN. EAN is at a point in time where we need more people with resources to step up and seize the opportunity to invest in our work and be part of the difference that we make together, to help achieve more sustainable financial footing for all the work that remains. The $15,000 that comes with this award is life-changing money, especially for someone with the economic background that I grew up in. And while I would love to use it for something like paying down student loan debt, since the most important thing is the sustainability of EAN's work, I've chosen to use the $15,000 that comes along with the Con Hogan Award as part of a matching gift challenge. And again, thanks to the generosity of the Maverick Lloyd Foundation, which is committing $85,000 to the challenge match for a total of $100,000. Every new or increased donation to EAN totaling up to $100,000 in the next year will be doubled. So your $100 would become $200, $1,000 would become $2,000, $10,000 would become $20,000, and so on. Funding this work is critical because things like truth, reason, and facts are not disposable. They must form the bedrock of policy deliberation and civic dialogue. If not elsewhere, then at least here in this brave little state. In collaboration that invites diverse perspectives and civil discourse while encouraging open-mindedness, that is not quaint. We can still learn from each other and work together for strategic action to make our state and world a better place. Before I close, I want to thank my wife, especially Joan, who is here, and I just want to say that I couldn't do the work that I do without her love and support and encouragement, and that of our amazing son, Liam. I've said this before, and I want to say it again. The best thing that I've ever done for our state is to convince Joan to move back home with me. So many Vermonters benefit from her ministry, her pastoral care, and her commitment to community and social justice, including through her work with the Unitarian Church of Montpelier, the Poor People's Campaign, and more. And through her example and her wisdom and care, I know that she makes me a better person every day, and I'm so lucky to have her as my wife and partner in life. So I want to end with this. In the afterword to his third and final Met Along the Way book of short stories, Con wrote about the reasons that he was ending the series. First, he wrote, "Some of the stories are starting to feel a little less relevant in these increasingly gritty times. As I reread them, I'm startled about how naive some of the stories sound about human nature. One example of this sense is how the political process has steadily and slowly descended to a much lower common denominator of character and quality than the colorful leaders of our past. There is a grayness," he wrote, "about the discourse that makes it ever more difficult to find the positive gems." Now, part of me understands and agrees with what Con wrote. But then I also remember all the colorful, good, generous people I have known who have served and continue to serve Vermont. And I also think of all the young folks, some of whom might be coming into this state house and developing their own dreams of serving their neighbors for the public good. A dream that formed in me so long ago and that I still hold 30 years later. I think of those who will be the next generation of public servants for Vermont and all of the important work that we and they have in front of us. I think of all of the people who are or will be committed to continuing Con's example and to continuing to honor his remarkable legacy through their work. And often, though things have often seemed gray of late, I do think that we have a bright future ahead of us because there are so many of those people, from previous award recipients to many others who have not been recognized, to all of you here tonight and those young people whose names we may not know yet. With our shared commitment to data-informed public service for the common good, it is an honor to be in your company. And it's an honor to commit to continue to doing this important work alongside all of you and those who will join us in the years to come. Because the political process, let us remember, is in large part, it's not inevitable. It's what we decide to make of it. So let's all work to shape it in Khan's example, so that together we can make life better for our neighbors and the next generation, and also so that when some Vermonter decides to write the next book of Met Along the Way stories of serving and living in Vermont, it can be filled with a whole new set of the positive gems that Khan spoke of, echoing those stories that Khan wrote about during his incredible life of service. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared. We've been talking about 10 years. We're at the end of this 10-year journey together. But I want to point out two things, and I'm going to introduce Steve Dale in just a second. Those of you that are in this room that gave the money to get this project started 10 years ago, and we promised we would never come back and ask you for money again, we didn't. And that money has been so well invested that there's actually a little bit of a legacy left. I'm going to ask Steve Dale and Patricia Coates. Steve Dale was on the committee for years and years. Patricia is at UVM at the Center for Community Engagement and the new Leahy Institute. And they're going to talk about carrying this work forward with the legacy that you all provided. P.S. Your names are on the back sheet of that brochure if you want to make sure that you got credit. What's going to happen next?
Thanks, Cheryl. We know it's late, and so we're going to do this very quickly. But we think it's very important at this stage of the game to talk about the fact that after 10 years of these awards, this legacy that we've been celebrating doesn't just stop. We have some great ideas. So it's my privilege to try to help the bridge here, and Tricia's going to tell you more detail about it. I was a longtime manager in human services and state government, a number of those years directly under the leadership of Con Hogan, and it's been a gift to be part of this committee for a long time. One quick note about experiencing life under Con's leadership. He did not, I was thinking about it as Jared was talking, I thought your comments were exceptional. Con did not, his guidance to the leaders that worked under him was that government cannot be the solution to everything. That rather, if we can furnish good data to local communities, and if we can come along beside those communities can make massive change. So that radically changes the nature of the work of those people who work in government. In recent months, I've thought a lot about the fact that perhaps that kind of an approach could be helpful in addressing this huge homelessness issue that we have been struggling with. So that's a subject for another day. So the committee spent time talking about how best to carry on Con's legacy. We called it some kind of a capstone project, and we debated many different ideas, and we talked to a number of folks here in the room about what might make sense. And we kept coming up with a number of different possible roads, and they all seemed to lead to the emerging Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships located at UVM, and to its director, Tricia Coates. And after several meetings with Tricia, we came to the belief that our objectives in this whole program that we've had over all these years would best be achieved for the foreseeable future by partnering with the Leahy Institute. So we now have a signed MOU with them that defines the future direction. So I'm going to turn this over to Tricia, who is going to share her we've both agreed to do this briefly, knowing we were at the tail end, but her rough vision of how this all might work, just to give you a sense of what's next. Tricia is a Vermont treasure. Many of us have known her in a variety of roles. She has worked for pretty much everybody in our congressional delegation over a long period of time. You've probably interacted with her around those kinds of roles. She's been an advocate for educational and economic opportunity in each of her roles, including years as the Director of Governmental and External Relations for the Vermont State Colleges system. She guided LUND, the statewide family services program, to financial stability during the COVID pandemic as president and CEO. Not an easy time to be involved, to be responsible for a large operation. So we are thrilled to be working with her, and I hope that you will all be equally as excited about this means of continuing to move forward Con Hogan's legacy. So Tricia.
Thank you very much, Steve. First of all, before I introduce myself, congratulations, Jared, and what a wonderful story you shared with us. It was very inspiring. And I also want to thank the other recipients, many of whom have been role models and inspirations for me through my career. My name is Tricia Coates, and I'm the director of the University of Vermont's Office of Engagement and the Leahy Institute for Rural Partnerships, which makes for a really interesting business card. But at its core, what my office does is tries to find opportunities for UVM faculty, staff, and students to connect with Vermont organizations that are doing the good work locally to make change. And so we have an opportunity through federal funding to provide grants that are funding partnership projects to address things like energy resilience and educational opportunity and healthcare access in rural communities throughout the state. At the end of the day, what I hope we do is provide new opportunities for UVM to engage in this way with Vermont communities. So I hope you see where this is leading, which is the magic that happened when, excuse me, Steve and Scott called me and said, my goodness, we have this legacy work that we'd like to continue, and could we talk about our ideas around how data can be helpful to Vermont communities. And it turns out that UVM does provide data to communities through the Center for Rural Studies and through the Leahy Institute. So this was perfect timing. We're building our data services program. We have pledged through this MOU to incorporate indicators of well-being in what we provide to Vermont communities. We have pledged that this information, that these data that we will make available to Vermont agencies and communities will be accessible. We'd like to visualize it. It will be using maps and et cetera. It will be accessible and it will be open source. And we've also pledged together that we'd like to convene leaders using the data to make sure that it remains user-friendly and accessible, and that we're using best practices. We're pleased to have members of the Con Hogan Committee who apparently are not done with their work, because now they're on my committee. Pleased to have them on our advisory board. So we are truly honored to hold this aspect of Con Hogan's legacy of providing the best data that we possibly can through the Land Grant Institution to Vermont communities and to the state. Thank you for working with us.
So guys, we're at that point where we're going to send you out to load up your Tupperware or whatever with any food that's left. I just want to say a couple of things. Jared did bring a video that's going to be available, a clip from it on the Vermont Community Foundation website. You'll be able to see all of you who have been our award recipients, all of the interviews and everything. Like the Hogan Award will still have a presence online. I just have to tell you, so Don and I have a daughter who became a musician despite being raised on a sheep farm. She's currently obsessed with a musical called Suffs, and her favorite song on that is "The Young Are at the Gate." And I just feel like it's so wonderful and invigorating to think all of the work that's gone on in Vermont for many years is now going to get carried on by all these incredible young people who are coming up. Maybe Liam is the youngest person here, I'm not sure. Or maybe Carolyn's daughters, I'm not. Okay. So with 3 reminders. Many of us were grateful to the Vermont Community Foundation for being the underpinning of this for years and years. Dan was here. Karen was here. Actually, it seems like the whole team was here. And we want to give a special shout out to Zoe Pike, who should have been listed as a committee member maybe, but she was there every step of the way doing everything that needed to be done. So shout out to the Vermont Community Foundation. And last night, they put on a Stacey Abrams meeting that had, I believe, 1,400 people, where Stacey Abrams said, so these are the things, the 3 things you need to remember. And we heard about it from many of our speakers today. Be curious. Use your data to figure things out, to know what's working. Solve problems. This is what's going on in the energy world, in the social service world. Maybe Steve is going to now convene some housing issues for us. I'm not quite sure. And do good. And to that, I just want to add, and smile and hug people as much as you can. So thank you all for coming. Please do take food. Thank you to the Hogan family for being here, for getting all this started. And thank you to all our award recipients for these many, many years. Be well.